All right, we're gonna kickstart this circuit off with split squat jumps. You wanna get that hip out underneath you. Make sure we have a nice right degree angle underneath the knee, and we're driving through that hip. Alternating sits in each leg, into the hip and out of the hip. Trying to keep that torso up nice and tall, and we're going for the full 30 seconds here. All right, after a 15-second break, you're gonna go down into bicycle ab crunches. So on this one, we're basically keeping that back nice and flat, low back pressed into the ground, and we are alternating opposite elbow to opposite knee. Notice that my hands are light on my head. I'm not pulling or cranking on my neck, and I'm actually turning my torso to get that elbow to meet that knee. And again, I'm gonna keep my low back pressed into the ground. 30 seconds. Next exercise up, after a 15-second break, I'm doing 30 seconds of push-up position jumping jacks. So in that push-up position, I wanna make sure that my wrists are directly under my elbows and my elbows are directly under my shoulders. I'm all lined up. I have my back in a neutral position, and all I'm basically doing is going out and in with my legs. The goal is to not bounce up and down as much as possible. So you gotta use those stabilizers to keep yourself in good alignment. 30 seconds. All right, after a 15-second rest, we're gonna go into a side plank with a pulse. So in this side plank position, you want your elbow directly underneath your shoulder, feet stacked. And in here, basically, I'm pulsing that hip up and down. So I'm really working my right obliques right now in order to get that hip straight up to the ceiling and then coming straight back down to that neutral alignment. I'm gonna go 30 seconds on this side, 15-second break, and then rotate to the other side. All right, 15 seconds is over, and now I'm setting up to get the other side on that lateral plank or side plank. And again, the same setup. Elbow directly underneath the shoulder, and that just prevents it from hurting. Something that I get quite often from people who aren't, lined up properly is that it hurts my shoulder, and that will be why. So you want to make sure your elbow is directly underneath that shoulder. Feet are stacked. You can also do this if the feet stacked method is too complicated or too difficult for you at this time. You can do the same thing, just resting on your knees instead. All right, next up, after a 15-second break, I'm going into glute bridges. So on these, I'm gonna set my heels down, have my toes lifted up, just to emphasize that I'm using my posterior chain muscles in order to do this lift. So basically, I'm going into hip extension by activating my glutes, keeping my core braced. My hamstrings are assisting, but what I wanna do is make sure that I keep my tailbone tucked under, so I'm not arching my way up into the lift, but I am driving my way up into the lift by, again, pushing through my glutes or my hips. Okay, after the 15-second break, I'm going into 30 seconds of a jackknife opposite. So another core-based exercise, rotational style, starting with both arms overhead. And in a jackknife fashion, I'm gonna reach that opposite shoulder blade off the ground to get my opposite hand to the opposite foot. And I'm trying to meet over my abdomen. So right hand to left foot, and left hand to right foot, making sure that I extend back with my arms and my legs each time. 30 seconds here. All right, after that 15-second break, I'm going into star jumps. On a star jump, you're gonna start with a nice wide stance, almost like a sumo stance, with your toes turned out, knees get pushed out, torso stays upright. So my goal is to, basically what's on my shirt should be able to read the entire time if I'm not dropping my chest. But I'm coming down with the, reaching down with the hands and then up like a star. So down into a sumo squat position and then exploding out for 30 seconds. All right, that 15-second break, I'm going to 30 seconds of a forward jump with a back pedal. So into that jump, I'm driving from the hips, and I'm landing soft and flexed in the knees and the hips with my chest up, with a full foot landing here. So explode out, land soft, and then back pedal back for 30 seconds. All right, after that 15-second break, now I'm going into a Russian twist. On this one, you, of course, have the option to use whatever weight that you have, a plate, kettlebell, dumbbell, medicine ball, or you can just go body weight style like I'm doing right here. Apologies, that's kind of hard to see with the camera, but basically my knees are bent. You can have your feet on the floor, or you can have them up, suspended up as you're going from side to side. All right, after that 15-second break after Russian twist, I'm going into basically just a high knee in place run for 30 seconds. So you have the option of placing your hands out in front like I have right here, just to ensure that you're getting your knees as close to that 90-degree bend of flexion as you possibly can. Make sure you're landing light on the balls of the feet, trying to keep your toes up or in that dorsiflex position. The other option here, if jumping is too much, you can just do a high knee march for 30 seconds. Okay, after a 15-second break, I'm going into shoulder taps here, where I put myself in a push-up position. You're gonna keep your feet about hip width apart. If you need a little more stability, if you feel your hips swaying a whole lot, or if the movement is a little more tough, you can spread your feet out wider to shoulder width, just to give yourself a more solid base. But basically, I'm just touching opposite hand to opposite shoulder for 30 seconds. Okay, after that 15-second break after shoulder taps, I'm going right into jumping jack squats. So with the jumping jack squats, kind of like it sounds, you're gonna go with the jumping jack stance, but instead of bringing arms overhead, I'm touching down to the floor with my hand while my feet go wide. The goal is to keep, again, my chest up and just keep a nice rhythmic movement, a mixture of some speed but some depth in this movement for 30 seconds. All right, that 15-second break here, I'm just setting some cones up about in wingspan length apart. If you don't have cones, that's totally fine. You can use water bottles if you want, or you can just go without. But basically in a skater hop, you are doing a lateral jump from side to side. As you land that jump into the hip with the knee underneath the hip and the ankle stabilizing under the knee, you're bringing that opposite hand across the body. Again, trying to keep the chest up, but you're absorbing the jump into the hip and you're initiating the jump out of the hip. 30 seconds on this one as your final exercise in this circuit.